The original Trans-Pacific Partnership video that I did was very well received for the most part, but had two primary complaints. The first being that it was a leak, not the final document, and the second that items discussed were overreactions. I'd like to address those and more since the full TPP text has been released. Let's talk about it in the comments, but first, my opinion. I'm Tarmack, and this is Feature Creep.
Round 2. Fight!
The Trans-Pacific Partnership is a trade agreement between 12 countries in the Pacific Rim: the US, Canada, Mexico, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, Peru, Vietnam, Malaysia, Singapore, Chile, and Brunei. It has been negotiated in secret, as all trade agreements are, for around 7 years, and was finalized on October 5th this year so that it can be sent to each of the respective governments for signing. The previous video that I did on this was based off of a leaked version of the intellectual property section that WikiLeaks put out. The full text has since been released and was put out on November 5th. So first, I would like to address a criticism that I faced while describing aspects of the TPP from the leak, which was that it wasn't the final document. Unfortunately, it was the final document. In the November 5th official release of the full TPP text, you will find that all clauses I referenced cover the same rule changes as they did in the leaked version. The second critique that was leveled at my commentary in the video was that examples were overreactions. I saw a fair bit of confusion in the comments with people misinterpreting what I was saying on a few items, so I'd like to summarize a bit of this again with some additional detail and give practical examples of how the TPP can very easily cause problems for gamers. I've also heavily populated the description with links to various government contact information for those wishing to express their discontent, and pages where you can read more about the TPP itself. If anyone can fill me in on non-English country links to the same kind of content, I will gladly update the description. Alright, so now that the full TPP text has been released, we've had some heavy opinions from lawyers which back up a lot of what I said based on the original leak. Michael Geist, for example, a law professor, commented that the TPP was very clearly set up to put US corporations at a competitive advantage. Unfortunately, so far, I've not seen much specifically about the video game industry. So, what does the TPP do, and how can that affect and indeed harm gamers? The first issue that has a direct, practical effect on gamers is Article 18.68 on technological protection measures. In plain English, it says that anyone who disables or gets around TPMs, which in video games are called DRM, is to be treated as though they have violated the copyright of the owner. Essentially, if you circumvent DRM, you can be treated the same as if you pirated the content. And as we've seen, the RIAA and MPAA are pretty heavy-handed with the lawsuits. Do we think that the Entertainment Software Association is going to be any different? But here's the weird part of the DRM piece. Governments can provide exceptions for non-profit libraries, museums, archives, educational institutions, and non-commercial public broadcasting groups. There is no clause that lets them permit it for personal use if you've purchased the product. Many countries have personal archiving laws that already exist, which will be trumped by this trade agreement. The practical side of this clause is that we can see lawsuits against not just pirates, but also legitimate end users. Or more correctly, we'll see those wonderful letters that let you pay $4,000 to not go to court. People will say that companies totally won't do that. Then why is it written like that? Never underestimate a lawyer's propensity to add billable time. And of course, there are civil penalties, which is the lawsuit side, but also criminal proceedings for those who sell circumvention tools. I'm not as concerned about the criminal side because outside of console crack chips, most circumvention doesn't cost anything. The next thing that I want to talk about is game mods. There was a fair amount of disagreement with my point that game modding could actually be in danger. Let's use Grand Theft Auto 5 as the example. Rockstar actively put in place security measures to prevent access to the game assets. It took clever modders to break those security measures to allow people to actually mod the game. This breaking security measures would very clearly apply under 18.68 on technological protection measures that I talked about earlier. And that modding actually put GTA Online in jeopardy because it's where cheats come into play. Some people will comment that it would be public relations suicide to go after modders, but in a game like GTA 5, modders are harming their bottom line. Remember that games these days are DLC platforms, meant in many cases to allow companies to sell cosmetics and other items. Well, if you can just mod in the cosmetic items by breaking security measures in the game, that has a direct effect on the game developer or publisher's revenue generation. If you think that won't end up in court, frankly, you're wrong. Further to that, the TPP mandates criminal charges in the case of what is called commercial scale distribution. So not just selling, but distributing on a large scale whether or not you make any money from it. What is important to remember here is that criminal charges are handled by law enforcement and are not the realm of corporate lawyers. so it doesn't even require an active effort from the publisher or developer, and some of these big mods would certainly qualify under commercial scale. And the last big one is the trade secret piece. There was a bit of criticism here because people simply didn't feel that knowing about unreleased games counts as trade secrets being exposed. Here's why they're wrong. A trade secret is essentially anything from how you make something to what you make, which is generally not known by the public and can provide an economic advantage over competitors. Very clearly, details about an unreleased video game qualifies as a trade secret. So here's where things get a little nasty. Section 18.78 on trade secrets outlines the requirement for criminal penalties for the unauthorized and willful disclosure of a trade secret. And there's a piece here that wasn't in the WikiLeaks chapter release. The section uses the phrase, "a manner contrary to honest commercial practices," and goes on to define that as breach of contract, breach of confidence, including, and this is the most important part, the acquisition of undisclosed information by third parties that knew or were grossly negligent in failing to know that items like breach of contract or confidence was involved. Every single trade secret leak that doesn't involve the company screwing up and releasing details early involves a breach of contract or confidence. If a person publishes details from an anonymous source, that person either knows that the anonymous source is breaching their contract or would be considered grossly negligent in failing to know that. There are no exceptions for news media as well. So, the TPP enables criminal charges for people who publish leaked video game information. It'll never be used like that, right? Then it clearly doesn't need to be written like that, right? Okay, so these are what I consider to be the most practical dangers that signing of the Trans-Pacific Partnership brings to the table. It treats people who remove DRM, whether for personal use or to help others, as though they pirated the content, and enables civil lawsuits on that basis. Modders, who have to break security measures preventing mods, can be treated like criminals. It also treats game journalists and others from the public who post game leaks like criminals. And there's one final little piece that bugs me a bit. I have an email out to the Electronic Frontier Foundation to see if they concur with my assessment of this piece of the text. Some of us on YouTube rely on fair use style provisions, but those are really only valuable in a courtroom. A lot of other gamers on YouTube rely on developer permission because without that permission, what they're doing can be considered copyright infringement. That's how devs and publishers can take content down through the DMCA. So, if commercial scale copyright infringement, even without a financial motive, is considered criminal, then any YouTuber not covered by a fair use provision that doesn't have permission from the developer has the potential to result in jail time. I'll update with an annotation if and when I hear back from the EFF. I don't think that this one is going to be a common concern for most because of the way that YouTube and the DMCA interact, but the possibility looks to be there, and that is scary. There were definitely some items from the previous TPP video that I did which I could have delved into a bit better. Hopefully this follow-up based on the actual text that was released will help answer some of the questions and criticisms that were leveled at the video. Remember, above all of this, that this trade agreement has far more going on than just intellectual property rules, and it was not designed with the consumer being considered first. In the description, you'll find more resources where you can read the full TPP text, links to directly contact an agency in several of the countries, as well as look up how to contact local representatives in the countries as well. As I only speak English, I'm not much use on the rest of them, so if anyone can provide the detail for those, I will add it. And as to the final criticism of saying that video games are not worth caring about because they're more serious concerns, look, people need to know how these massive trade deals may affect them. At the end of the day, the best way to engage any group of people is to bring it home, so to speak. The TPP has provisions that are very damaging, and there is still time to do something about it. The expectation is that the agreement will be signed off by most or all of the countries by early next year, with full ratification to follow. We can sit back and do nothing, or we can speak out. I've done my part. Will you? Thanks for watching. That's all I have to say. Tarmack out.